welcome back. I've been a little sick, so and I was in Mexico, so this is coming late, but it's here. So as you guys know, I'm going to be reviewing Puerto Rico. I will start the video as always with how I related to the book or the culture in the book. Then I will give a brief history of Puerto Rico. I will give my review on the book, and I will end with 5 fun facts about Puerto Rico. So let's get started. So how did I relate to Puerto Rico? I felt, as I was reading the book, I felt really, I really identified with the parenting style that was described by the girl who was the protagonist, Esmeralda. So she would have a lot of questions for her mom, and her mom at some point would get frustrated with her. At points would get frustrated and would say, just do what you're being told to do, stop asking questions. And I just found that really funny because Mexican moms tend to do that sometimes too. So I just found that cute. Another thing is that Esmeralda, the protagonist, like I mentioned, is also the eldest, and so am I. So I thought it was really interesting how in Puerto Rican families as well, she talked a lot about how she had a lot more responsibilities. She felt a responsibility to help with her little siblings when her mom was busy or her mom was birthing in some of the book. So she would always make sure that her siblings felt okay and were safe before a neighbor or an aunt would come and help them. Lastly is that they have really large families. This did take place, I think, in the 50s. So I'm not sure if nowadays people in Puerto Rico have big families, but people in Mexico certainly do. And she also talked a lot about how her mom cooked her food every day, and so did my mom. I had home cooked food for dinner every day. So I thought that was a really nice similarity. Okay, so let's get on to the history. So in 1000 CE, the Taínos found the island and established themselves there, coming from South America, and they named the island Boriquen. That's where you get the name Boricua, which is what Puerto Ricans with Taíno lineage often call themselves. In 1493, Christopher Columbus, on his second expedition to the Americas, reaches Puerto Rico and decides to change the island's name to San Juan Bautista and introduces Catholicism. In 1520, the Spaniards take forced control of the island and change the name to Puerto Rico officially, bringing diseases, the system of slavery. So they brought, slaves from Africa, and they displaced a lot of the Taínos. On the 23rd of September of 1868, there was the Grito de Lares, which was a revolution for its independence from Spain. In 1873, slavery is abolished. 1898, the United States and Spain go into a war, and this ends with the signing of the Treaty of Paris that results in Puerto Rico being liberated from Spain, but now under control from the United States. In 1899, Hurricane Santiago occurs. In 1917, Puerto Ricans gain U.S. citizenship, although it's important to note that they still do not have a right to vote in United States elections, and they do have a representative, I believe, in D.C., but that representative speaks about the interests of the nation without a voting power. Rico now functions as a free state associated by owned by the United States, so it does have its own constitution. In the 1930s, there are closures of sugarcane factories. In 1938, the Democratic Party is established by Luis Muñoz Marin. In 1947, the U.S. implements an operation called Bootstrap, with where they were trying to industrialize the island. In 1948, the U.S. allows Puerto Rico to establish its own governor, and Luis Muñoz Marin is chosen as the first governor of Puerto Rico. In the 50s, there is more immigration to the United States. In 1952, the U.S. Congress passes the Constitution of Puerto Rico, giving it legitimizing it as a territory, as a non-incorporated territory. In 1987, the population of Puerto Ricans living in the United States reaches 2.5 million. And in 2000, the first woman governess is elected. Her name was Sila M. Calderon. In 2015, the government of Puerto Rico is declared bankrupt, and they owed more than $15 billion. In 2016, as a response to this, the United States Congress implements a committee called Promesa to try to handle that debt. A lot of people aren't on board with that, as they felt that this would just mean that the United States would continue to impose colonizer restrictions. In September of 2017, Hurricane Irma and Hurricane Maria devastate the island. The electric network falls, and people stay without electricity for up to 8 months. In 2019, there is a protest for 11 days trying to get Governor Ricardo Rosello out of his post, and they were successful in doing that. In 2020, there are many earthquakes in the south and the southeast of the island that bring more devastation to the infrastructure of Puerto Rico, and the electric grid collapses once more. In September of 2022, Hurricane Fiona happens, and currently there are still reparations happening in parts of the island currently after the hurricanes Irma and Maria, which I mentioned happened in September of 2017. Tourism has increased, and this has helped the economy of Puerto Rico, and people continue to fight for just treatment and not to be treated as second-class citizens of the United States, which is why some people wish for Puerto Rico to become a state of the United States in order to get those same privileges. So on to the book review. I really loved reading through the eyes of a child who had so much curiosity about the difference between life in countryside, right, versus her life, versus the life that she got to briefly have in the in an urban setting. So I just found like her questions and like the way it was narrated really beautifully. I loved learning about like what it meant to live in a rural part of Puerto Rico, and how like she slept in hammocks, and like I just found that really interesting. Like that was her, her experience, and like it's just very different to like the rural experience I have, or the idea of a rural life I have from Mexico, which isn't as tropical. And then another thing I found really interesting or very well done in the book is like the talk on imperialism, where an example is she talks about how there were men from the United States who came and gave the mothers or the parents lessons on nutrition, and they come and they tell them like these are the proportions you're supposed to have, and like these are the different meals you're supposed to have. And they bring food that is not native to the island at all. So, for example, one of the moms tells her, like, well, how are we supposed to find, like, apples, for example? Like, can we substitute that with something that actually grows here, like mangoes? So I just thought that was really interesting how, like, imperialism, or, like, what it constitutes to be, to be American, which is one of the questions she asks her dad, is it's not just, like, an adoption of a language, right? It's an adoption of even like wanting to impose like how you eat, like what you eat. So I just thought that was really well done. I would really recommend the book. It's really lovely. The last thing I wanted to touch on was the title of the book, When I Was Puerto Rican. So Esmeralda Santiago, the author, identifies as only Puerto Rican in her childhood before they are forced to move to New York, before her parents decide to move to New York. And so in the introduction of the Spanish book, she includes this, and it's not in the English version, so I'm translating. It says, years ago, if someone would have indicated to me the many Spanglishisms in my vocabulary, the embarrassment would have left me mute. Today I have to accept that this invented language that is invented by necessity is the one that allows me to express myself in my own way. When I write in English, I need to translate from the Spanish that guards my memories. When I speak in Spanish, I have to translate from the English that defines my present. And when I write in Spanish, I find myself between three languages: the Spanish of my childhood, the English of my adulthood, and the Spanglish that crosses from one world to the next, as we crossed from our town in Puerto Rico to our new hometown in Brooklyn. And I just felt very identified with, as someone who is Mexican and then moved to Los Angeles and grew up in Los Angeles in a family that only spoke Spanish. I really understand that I feel Spanglish is the best of both worlds, where where I can use expressions from both languages that maybe don't translate very well, and to better express myself. So I really like that part. And to wrap up the video, I wanted to give 5 fun facts about Puerto Rico. So number 1 is that Puerto Rico has the largest rum factory in the world. It is called Casa Bacardi, or the House of Bacardi. It is 137 acres, and 400,000 liters of rum are produced there a day. Number 2 is that the sounds of the bats in the movie Batman Forever were recorded in the national park, in the caves of the national park of the Rio Camuy, of the River Camuy, and it is the largest system of caves in the Western Hemisphere, and also one of the largest in the world, and it has more than 200 caves. Number 3 is that Puerto Rico has 3 bioluminescent beaches, which is beautiful. I'm very excited to be able to see it someday. Number 4, Puerto Rico has one of the longest Christmas celebrations. They celebrate right after Thanksgiving and don't end until about mid-January. And number 5 is that the deepest part of the Atlantic Ocean is the fossa, or the trench, north of Puerto Rico, which is 8.3 thousand meters or 27,000 feet deep. And that's all. So I will see you guys on Friday for my next video. See you guys then. Thanks for watching.